The sheer gall of this brazen bigot is frankly astounding. Hasbeen Useless, also known as Humza Yousaf, the former First Minister of Scotland, short-lived as he was, Humza the Brief, you might call him, he's taken it upon himself to slam Nigel Farage and Suella Braverman in that ever-so-neutral bastion of journalism, The Guardian, because, naturally, where else would you go to keep the far-right bogeyman nonsense alive and kicking? On the former Home Secretary, Yousaf whines, Islamophobia is so acceptable that they now barely bother disguising it. Just take the example of the former UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who can openly write a newspaper column stating, the Islamists, the extremists, and the anti-Semites are in charge now. Well, I mean, anyone fair and impartial looking at the streets of London, awash with calls for jihad and intifada every weekend since October the 7th, might reach a different conclusion fairly. And on Nigel Farage, he bleats, Farage, who during his campaign has said that Muslims do not share British values, has a history of making Islamophobic remarks. In 2015, he said that people had fears of Muslims as a fifth column. In 2013, he suggested Muslim migrants were coming here to take us over. Farage has failed to get elected 7 times, and yet despite this, and regardless of the fact that he has made a living out of fanning the flames of religious and racial tension, the British media appears obsessed with platforming him. Well, using the flames of religious sectarianism, the SNP would never do such a thing, would they? It's not as if Nicola Sturgeon would hand out Palestinian flags in order to actually try and drum up votes. It would never happen. Yousaf talks about British values as if he's a walking, talking embodiment of them. Is it a British value to peddle the racist myth that skin colour dictates privilege? Has Farage ever stood in a parliamentary chamber and lambasted the Scots for their whiteness? Or is Yousaf the one that's fanning the flames of religious and racial tension here?
The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every Prison Governor, white. And not just Justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white.
And let's not overlook this blatant hypocrisy. He bangs on about British values, yet when he's in Pakistan, he waxes lyrical about how he's a proud son of that nation.
I'm very proud of being the first Scottish Pakistani to become First Minister of Scotland. So I'm a son of the soil there in Pakistan.
Useless pontificates. The real danger is that by appeasing the far right, we also risk emboldening IS-inspired extremists too. If we allow this to happen, the consequences could be devastating. The irony, what exactly do we think these Islamists are, if not far right? They aim to impose Sharia law, to enslave women, to kill gays, and dismantle our way of life. How could anyone view IS-inspired extremists as anything other than far-right? They prefer violence over democracy and intimidation over argument. If that's not a fascist ideology, I don't know what is. I recently saw a clip of a gay man in London being harassed by a Muslim woman screaming that he's committing a sin as he innocently walks down the street.
It's a sin to be gay! It's a sin to be gay! Yes! It's a sin to be gay! It's a sin to be...
If she were a Christian, she'd be condemned. So I ask Humza Yousaf, is it Islamophobic for gay men to tell this woman to take a hike? This farce will end in tears, right, as the left attempts to reconcile the LGBTQ plus agenda with Islamic dogma. And my mate, the Persian reform activist Yunus Sadajiani, has pointed out that the alliance between Islamists and the political left in Iran led to the immediate expulsion and extermination of that left once the Islamic Republic was established, arguing that such a world is incompatible with those who don't share British values or French values for that matter, or Swedish values, or even European values, if there's such a thing. That isn't Islamophobia to argue this. It's realism, a term that Humza Yousaf might want to look up whilst he's busy playing the victim. But if you thought that things in Scotland were going to get better, here's the leader of the Scottish Labour Party.
Every chief executive of every council and every government department, white. Every director of a department in Scotland, white. Every principal of a college or university in Scotland, white. Every head teacher in Scotland, white. Every chair of a public sector body in Scotland, white. Every High Court judge in Scotland, white. Every prison governor in Scotland, white. Every editor of a news organisation in Scotland, white. Why?
Sounds an awful lot like Humza Useless, doesn't it? I don't think this is going away anytime soon.